Master word list. Words starting with letter T. Tacit means understood. For example, we have a tacit agreement based on only a handshake. Taciturn means habitually silent. For example, the stereotypical cowboy is a taciturn soul, answering lengthy questions with a yep or nope. Tactile means pertaining to the organs. For example, his calloused hands had lost their tactile sensitivity. Taint means contaminate, cause to lose purity. For example, one speck of dirt on your utensils may contain enough germs to taint an entire batch of preserves. Talisman means charm to bring good luck. For example, Joe believed the carved pendant he found in Vietnam served him as a talisman and brought him safely through the war. Talon means claw of bird. For example, the falconer wore a leather gauntlet to avoid being clawed by the hawk's talons. Tangential means peripheral, only slightly connected. For example, despite Clark's attempts to distract her with tangential remarks, Lois kept on coming back to her main question. Tangible means able to be touched, real. For example, although Tom did not own a house, he had several tangible assets: a car, a television, a PC that he could sell if he needed cash. Tenure means person who turns animal hides into leather. For example, using a solution of tan bark, the tanner treated the cowhide, transforming it into supple leather. Tantalize means tease, torture with disappointment. For example, Tom loved to tantalize his younger brother with candy. He knew the boy was forbidden to have it. Tantamount means equivalent in effect or value. For example, though Rudy claimed his wife was off visiting friends, his shriek of horror when she walked into the room was tantamount to a confession that he believed she was dead. Tantrum means fit of petulance. For example, the child learned that he could have almost anything if he had a tantrum. Tarantula means venomous spider. For example, we need an antitoxin to counteract the bite of the tarantula. Tarry means delay, dawdle. For example, we can't tarry if we want to get to the airport on time. Taut means tight, ready. For example, the captain maintained that he ran a taut ship. Tautological means needlessly repetitious. For example, in the sentence "it was visible to the eye," the phrase "to the eye" is tautological. Tautology means unnecessary repetition. For example, joyful happiness is an illustration of tautology. Tawdry means cheap and gaudy. For example, he won a few tawdry trinkets in Coney Island. Tedious means boring, tiring. For example, the repetitious nature of work on the assembly line made Martin's job very tedious. Temerity means boldness, rashness. For example, do you have the temerity to argue with me? Temper means moderate. For example, not even her supervisor's grumpiness could temper Nancy's enthusiasm for her new job. Temperament means characteristic frame of mind. For example, although the twins look alike, they differ markedly in temperament. Taut is calm, but Rod is excitable. Temperate means restrained, self-controlled. For example, try to be temperate in your eating this holiday season. If you control your appetite, you won't gain too much weight. Tempestuous means stormy, impassioned, violent. For example, racket-throwing tennis star John McEnroe was famed for his displays of tempestuous temperament. Tempo means speed of music. For example, I find the band's tempo too slow for such a lively dance. Temporal means not lasting forever, limited by time. For example, at one time in our history, temporal rulers assumed that they had been given their thrones by divine right. Temporize means avoid committing oneself. For example, I cannot permit you to temporize any longer. I must have a definite answer today. Tenacious means holding fast. For example, I had to struggle to break his tenacious hold on my arm. Tenacity means firmness, persistence. For example, Jean Valjean could not believe the tenacity of Inspector Javert. Here all Valjean had done was to steal a loaf of bread, and the inspector had pursued him doggedly for 20 years. Tendentious means having an aim. For example, the editorials in this periodical are tendentious rather than truth-seeking. Tender means offer, extend. For example, although no formal charges had been made against him, in the wake of the recent scandal the mayor felt he should tender his resignation. Tenet means doctrine. For example, the agnostic did not accept the tenets of their faith. Tensile means capable of being stretched. For example, mountain climbers must know the tensile strength of their ropes. Tentative means not fully developed, experimental. For example, unsure of his welcome at the Christmas party, Scrooge took a tentative step into his nephew's drawing room. Tenuous means thin, rare, slim. For example, the allegiance of our allies is held by rather tenuous ties. Tenure means time during which such an office is held. For example, he has permanent tenure in this position and cannot be fired. Tepid means lukewarm. For example, during the summer, I like to take a tepid bath, not a hot one. Termination means end. For example, though the time for termination of the project was near, we still had a lot of work to finish before we shut up shop. Terminology means terms used in a science or art. For example, the special terminology developed by some authorities in the field has done more to confuse the layman than to enlighten him. Terminus means last stop of railroad. For example, after we reached the railroad terminus, we continued our journey into the wilderness on saddle horses. Terrestrial means earthly, pertaining to the land. For example, in many science fiction films, alien invaders from outer space plan to destroy all terrestrial life. Terse means concise, abrupt. For example, there is a fine line between speech that is terse and to the point and speech that is too abrupt. Testy means irritable, short-tempered. For example, my advice is to avoid discussing this problem with him today, as he is rather testy and may shout at you. Tether means tie with a rope. For example, before we went to sleep, we tethered the horses to prevent their wandering off during the night. Thematic means relating to a unifying motif or idea. For example, those who think of Moby Dick as a simple adventure story about whaling miss its underlying thematic import. Theocracy means government run by religious leaders. For example, though some pilgrims aboard the Mayflower favored the establishment of a theocracy in New England, many of their fellow voyagers preferred a non-religious form of government. Theoretical means not practical or applied, hypothetical. For example, Bob was better at applied engineering and computer programming than he was at theoretical physics and math. Therapeutic means curative. For example, now better known for its racetrack, Saratoga Springs first gained attention for the therapeutic qualities of its famous healing waters. Thermal means pertaining to heat. For example, the natives discovered that the hot springs made excellent thermal baths and began to develop their community as a health resort. Thespian means pertaining to drama. For example, her success in the school play convinced her she was destined for a thespian career. Threadbare means shabby and poor. For example, the poor adjunct professor hid the threadbare spots on his jacket by sewing leather patches on his sleeves. Thrifty means careful about money, economical. For example, a thrifty shopper compares prices before making major purchases. Thrive means prosper, flourish. For example, despite the impact of the recession on the restaurant trade, Phillips Cafe thrived. Throes means violent anguish. For example, the throes of despair can be as devastating as the spasms accompanying physical pain. Throng means crowd. For example, throngs of shoppers jammed the aisles. Thwart means baffle, frustrate. For example, he felt that everyone was trying to thwart his plans and prevent his success. Tightwad means excessively frugal person, miser. For example, Jill called Jack a tightwad because he never picked up the check. Tiller means handle used to move boat's rudder. For example, fearing the wind might shift suddenly and capsize the skiff, Tom kept one hand on the tiller at all times. Timidity means lack of self-confidence or courage. For example, if you are to succeed as a salesman, you must first lose your timidity and fear of failure. Timorous means fearful, demonstrating fear. For example, his timorous manner betrayed the fear he felt at the moment. Tirade means extended scolding, denunciation. For example, every time the boss holds a meeting, he goes into a lengthy tirade, scolding us for everything from tardiness to padding our expenses. Titanic means gigantic. For example, titanic waves beat against the majestic SS Titanic, driving it against the concealed iceberg. Title means right or claim to possession, mark of rank. For example, though the penniless Duke of Ragwort no longer held title to the family estate, he still retained his title as head of one of England's oldest families. Titter means nervous laugh. For example, her aunt's constant titter nearly drove her mad. Titular means nominal holding of title without obligations. For example, although he was the titular head of the company, the real decisions were made by his general manager. Toady means servile flatterer. For example, never tell the boss anything he doesn't wish to hear. He doesn't want an independent advisor, he just wants a toady. Tome means large volume. For example, he spent much time in the libraries poring over ancient tomes. Tonic means invigorating, refreshing. For example, the tart homemade ginger ale had a tonic effect on Kit, she perked right up. Topography means physical features of a region. For example, before the generals gave the order to attack, they ordered a complete study of the topography of the region. Torpor means lethargy, sluggishness. For example, throughout the winter, nothing aroused the bear from his torpor. He would not emerge from hibernation until spring. Torrent means rushing stream, flood. For example, day after day of heavy rain saturated the hillside until the water ran downhill in torrents. Torrid means passionate, hot, or scorching. For example, Harlequin romances publish torrid tales of love affairs, some set in torrid climates. Torso means trunk of statue with head and limbs missing. For example, this torso, found in the ruins of Pompeii, is now on exhibition in the museum in Naples. Tortuous means winding, full of curves. For example, because this road is so tortuous, it is unwise to go faster than 20 miles an hour on it. Totter means move unsteadily, sway. For example, on unsteady feet, the drunk tottered down the hill to the nearest bar. Touchstone means stone used to test the fineness of gold alloys. For example, what touchstone can be used to measure the character of a person? Touchy means sensitive. For example, do not mention his bald spot, he's very touchy about it. Tout means publicize, praise excessively. For example, I lost confidence in my broker after he touted some junk bonds to me that turned out to be a bad investment. Toxic means poisonous. For example, we must seek an antidote for whatever toxic substance he has eaten. Tract means region of land. For example, the king granted William Penn a tract of land in the New World. Penn then printed a tract in which he encouraged settlers to join his colony. Tractable means docile, easily managed. For example, although Susan seemed a tractable young woman, she had a stubborn streak of independence that occasionally led her to defy the powers. Traduce means exposed to slander. For example, his opponents tried to traduce the candidate's reputation by spreading rumors about his past. Trajectory means path taken by a projectile. For example, the police tried to locate the spot from which the assassin had fired the fatal shot by tracing the trajectory of the bullet. Tranquility means calmness, peace. For example, after the commotion and excitement of the city, I appreciate the tranquility of these fields and forests. Transcendent means surpassing, exceeding ordinary limits. For example, for the amateur chef, dining at the 4-star restaurant was a transcendent experience. The meal surpassed his wildest dreams. Transcribe means copy. For example, when you transcribe your notes, please send a copy to Mr. Smith and keep the original for our files. Transgression means violation of a law. For example, forgive us our transgressions, we know not what we do. Transient means momentary, temporary. For example, Lexi's joy at finding the perfect Christmas gift for Phil was transient. She still had to find presents for the cousins. Transition means going from one state of action to another. For example, during the period of transition from oil heat to gas heat, the furnace will have to be shut off. Transitory means impermanent, fleeting. For example, fame is transitory. Today's rising star is all too soon tomorrow's washed-up has-been. Translucent means partly transparent. For example, we could not recognize the people in the next room because of the translucent curtains that separated us. Transmute means change, convert to something different. For example, he was unable to transmute his dreams into actualities. Transparent means easily detected, permitting light to pass through freely. For example, John's pride in his son is transparent. No one who sees the two of them together can miss it. Transport means strong emotion. For example, Margot was a creature of extremes, at one moment in transports of joy over a vivid sunset, at another moment in transports of grief over a dying bird. Trappings means outward decorations, ornaments. For example, he loved the trappings of success, the limousines, the stock options, the company jet. Traumatic means pertaining to an injury caused by violence. For example, in his nightmares, he kept on recalling the traumatic experience of being wounded in battle. Travail means painful labor. For example, how long do you think a man can endure such travail and degradation without rebelling? Traverse means go through or across. For example, when you traverse this field, be careful of the bull. Travesty means comical parody. For example, the ridiculous decision the jury has reached is a travesty of justice. Treacly means sticky sweet, cloyingly sentimental. For example, irritatingly cheerful, always looking on the bright side, Pollyanna speaks nothing but treacly sentimentalities. Treatise means article treating a subject systematically and thoroughly. For example, he is preparing a treatise on the Elizabethan playwrights for his graduate degree. Trek means travel, journey. For example, the tribe made their trek farther north that summer in search of game. Tremor means trembling, slight quiver. For example, she had a nervous tremor in her right hand. Tremulous means trembling, wavering. For example, she was tremulous more from excitement than from fear. Trenchant means cutting, keen. For example, I am afraid of his trenchant wit, for it is so often sarcastic. Trepidation means fear, nervous apprehension. For example, as she entered the office of the Dean of Admissions, Sharon felt some trepidation about how she would do in her interview. Trespass means unlawfully enter the boundaries of some else's property. For example, the wicked baron flogged any poacher who trespassed on his private hunting grounds. Tribute means tax levied by a ruler, mark of respect. For example, the colonists refused to pay tribute to a foreign despot. Trifling means trivial, unimportant. For example, why bother going to see a doctor for such a trifling, everyday cold? Trinket means knick-knack, bauble. For example, whenever she traveled abroad, Ethel would pick up costume jewelry and other trinkets as souvenirs. Trite means hackneyed, commonplace. For example, the trite and predictable situations in many television programs turn off many viewers, who, in turn, turn off their sets. Trivial means unimportant, trifling. For example, too many magazines ignore newsworthy subjects and feature trivial affairs. Trough means container for feeding farm animals. For example, the hungry pigs struggled to get at the fresh swill in the trough. The surfer rode her board, coasting along in the trough between two waves. Truculence means aggressiveness, ferocity. For example, Tynan's reviews were noted for their caustic attacks and general tone of truculence. Truism means self-evident truth. For example, many a truism is summed up in a proverb. For example, marry in haste, repent at leisure. Truncate means cut the top off. For example, the top of a cone that has been truncated in a plane parallel to its base is a circle. Tryst means meeting. For example, the lovers kept their tryst even though they realized their danger. Tumult means commotion, riot. For example, she could not make herself heard over the tumult of the mob. Tundra means treeless plain in Siberia and Arctic North America. For example, despite the cold, many geologists are trying to discover valuable mineral deposits in the tundra. Turbid means muddy, having the sediment disturbed. For example, the water was turbid after the children had waded through it. Turbulence means state of violent agitation. For example, warned of approaching turbulence in the atmosphere, the pilot told the passengers to fasten their seatbelts. Turgid means swollen, distended. The turgid river threatened to overflow the levees and flood the countryside. Turmoil means great commotion and confusion. For example, Lydia running off with a soldier, mother fainting at the news. The Bennett household was in turmoil. Turncoat means traitor. For example, the British considered Benedict Arnold a loyalist, the Americans considered him a turncoat. Turpitude means depravity. For example, a visitor may be denied admittance to this country if she has been guilty of moral turpitude. Tutelage means guardianship, training. For example, under the tutelage of such masters of the instrument, she made rapid progress as a virtuoso. Tycoon means wealthy leader. For example, John D. Rockefeller was a prominent tycoon. Typhoon means tropical hurricane or cyclone. For example, if you like Twister, you'll love Typhoon. Tyranny means oppression, cruel government. For example, Frederick Douglass fought against the tyranny of slavery throughout his life. Tyro means beginner, novice. For example, for a mere tyro, you have produced some wonderfully expert results. End of the word list with words starting with letter T.